In the last two modules of the course, we've had a chance to spend a bit of time working with sound in a film. We've looked at how you can use synchronous sound to highlight and focus attention on the important parts of a scene. And we've also looked at the role of off-screen sound and how you can use it to motivate the drama in a cut and continue pushing the story forward in creative ways. Now, let's have some fun and put these techniques to use in a real editing demonstration. You're about to see how we can significantly affect the events and the meaning of a scene using nothing more than sound effects, a touch of music, and some relatively minor adjustments to the picture. Let's start out by having a look at part of a scene from Quentin Tarantino's film, The Hateful Eight. In case you haven't seen the film, it tells the story of a bounty hunter, played by Kurt Russell, traveling through Wyoming in the late 1800s. In tow, he's got a captured fugitive, played by Jennifer Jason Leigh. They stop over at a stagecoach lodge to take shelter from a winter storm, where they end up snowed in with a group of other travelers. At this point, complications arise and chaos ensues. At one point, Kurt Russell's character, John Ruth, gathers up everyone's guns and asks one of the other men, O.B. Jackson, to go outside and dump them into the latrine. I'm going to play this 2-minute and 38-second section of the film to give you an idea of the starting point. Then, we're going to create a different version where we add some new developments to the scene using only sound. One thing I should mention is that I've upcut the scene once to make it a tad shorter just for the sake of this demonstration. All I really did was remove a bit of the conversation that isn't relevant to the narrative that we're going to be crafting here. Let's have a look.
Hand me that little bucket. O.B., go to the outhouse. Take this bucket and dump it down the shit.
Why do I gotta go outside?
Now, your jacket's already on, and I sorta kinda trust you.
So, Damagoo, I suppose this blizzard counts as a stroke of luck, as far as you're concerned.
You don't hear me complaining, do you?
Nope, I sure don't. Well, how about you, Oswaldo?
How about me what?
Look, considering all the things I've done for money, I ain't one to judge, but don't you feel just the least little bad about hanging a woman?
Well, until they invent a trigger a woman can't pull, if you're a hangman, you're going to hang women.
Well, hell, I guess I ain't never looked at it like that before.
When it comes to some of them mean bastards out there, it's the only thing does the job. You really only need to hang mean bastards. But mean bastards, you need to hang.
You goddamn son of a bitch! I almost died out there! I ain't ever going out in that shit! Ever again!
Okay, so that's the original scene. Now let's see what we can do by harnessing the power of creative sound editing. In the original scene, the primary antagonist is the freezing winter storm outside. When we see O.B. exit the front door of the lodge, the conditions look pretty harsh, with the wind howling and almost no visibility. The film cuts back to the interior, giving us a few moments with the other characters, as they're slurping their stew and trying to stay warm, discussing the idea of bringing evil men and women to justice by hanging. Eventually, we hear a few bangs on the front door, and OB bursts inside, nearly frozen. Two of the other men start by nailing a few boards onto the door to fully secure it from the blowing wind, while OB wraps himself in a bearskin and tries to get warm. Now, that's the way this plays out in the feature, but just to show you what's possible to achieve with sound, let's have a little fun. In our version of the scene, we're going to add a complication for OB when he goes outside. Not only is he going to need to deal with the winter storm, but we'll be adding a wild bear to the equation. We're going to simulate it stalking him and chasing him back inside. Of course, because a bear was never part of this scene, we'll never actually show it. Its presence will be created using only carefully placed sound effects, Foley, and music. Now, I've picked out a handful of sound effects we can use here. For the stalking and the lead up to the attack, we've got everything from stylized growls like this, to bear roars, to heavy breaths, and some stomps and footsteps in the snow. Then for the actual attack, we've got some more growls, some clothing rips, a human scream, and some wood creaks. And we've got some pounding on the door, which we took from the original scene. Alright, so we've made a plan, and we've gathered the ingredients we need to support it. Now, let's start putting together this new version of the scene. Coming up in the next lesson, we're going to begin the editing work by cutting the sound layers that will form the basis for our new moments. Alright, I'll see you in a bit. In this section, we'll be cutting an invisible story using sound. I should point out that I'll be placing the dialogue and production audio on tracks A1 through A4, and all sound effects on A5 down. We won't be strictly adhering 100% to the perfect timeline layout that we discussed earlier, because our screen recording for this tutorial makes things a little bit trickier with regard to desktop real estate and track spacing. Alright, so the two primary moments we'll be sound designing. The first is when OB goes outside, where we'll simulate the bear stalking and watching him. The second is when the bear attacks and OB bursts back into the lodge. Let's work from front to back, beginning with the stalking. When OB heads outside, the first shot of the exterior comes on with an aggressive wind gust.
Jacket's already on and I sorta kinda trust you.
Let's add a bit of a subtle growl to that wind to hint at the presence of our imaginary bear.
I sorta kinda trust you.
Okay, and let's keyframe a little audio fade in at the top of the clip so the sound doesn't come on quite as abruptly. This will help it blend better with the wind. Nice, that works. Now, let's hit this a little bit more on the nose and lay in a loud, echoed bear roar a couple seconds later. And we'll add a bit of reverb ring out to let it trail off into the sound of the storm. If you've taken some of our other training courses, you may have already learned how to create these ring outs. But the basic concept is that you take the last note of a music cue, or in this case, the last part of a sound effect, and you add a reverb effect to give that end of the sound a long trailing decay. The method for doing this will vary a little bit based on your software. If you'd like some more help creating one in your program, just email us at editors@filmeditingpro.com and we'll help you out. Alright, I think OB officially has a bear problem on his hands. Now, after he finishes dumping the guns in the outhouse and starts heading back, let's make it seem like the bear is located between OB and the door to the lodge, which would obviously not be good. And given the low visibility, it's a trap he'll probably walk right into, adding a bit of anticipation and tension for the viewer. Let's first use some keyframes to drop the levels on the wind and the outside ambience. This is going to make some audio room for the new sounds to be heard. How about a decrease of around 10 dB? Okay, great. Now let's add another growl with a bit more clarity and proximity as we cut into the shot that's arguably the bear's POV. Alright. Now let's indicate that the bear is moving, preparing himself for the impending attack. To do so, we'll add a foot landing on crunchy snow. And a bit of a low-end bassy stomp or thud sound, in this case, one meant to simulate the footsteps of a Tyrannosaurus Rex. And now we'll add another snort. Alright, so altogether we've got this sound. Which, when laid over the existing scene audio, sounds like this. Now, we'll duplicate this all to create a second step and use a slightly different growl and snort sound to keep the effect from sounding repetitive. And now, let's also add a little bit of low snarling and breathing to really solidify the bear's presence. And we'll just tweak the levels and the EQ a little bit. Okay, now let's see how this moment feels with everything cut in.
So, Gamakoo.
Alright, I think that works. Pretty convincing. In this lesson, we started cutting our story sound. We simulated a bear stalking OB outside the cabin. And we accomplished that using a variety of bear growls, footsteps, and breaths. Coming up in the next lesson, we'll continue cutting the sound layers as we move on to the simulated bear attack section of the scene. Alright, I'll see you in a bit. In the last lesson, we started crafting our invisible narrative. We used sound to simulate a bear stalking OB outside the cabin. Now, let's keep going and build out more layers of sound to design the actual bear attack. In the original scene, OB pounds on the door a couple times and then barges back in out of the cold, startling the other people. In our version of the scene, we'll use this as the opportunity to simulate the bear attacking OB as he narrowly escapes with his life by making it back to the lodge. Here's the original barge-in moment.
You really only need to hang mean bastards. But mean bastards, you need to hang.
You goddamn son of a bitch! I almost died out there!
Now, let's add a couple bear growls right before the first bang on the door. Alright, and let's grab one more. That'll work. Now, let's layer it on top of our first roar and see if we come up with something that sounds good. I'm going to increase the levels on the first roar a little bit. And then I'm going to decrease them on the second. Let's see how it sounds. Nice. Now we'll layer in one more longer bear roar that extends out a couple seconds. Alright, now after the first roars, which are meant to serve as the beginning of the attack, let's add a human scream. This scream goes on for a while, so we'll use the trail out of another human yell to stop the yell right before OB barges through the door, and give the ending a nice bit of character. To blend these two yells, I'm just going to use a simple 10-frame cross dissolve between them. And then I'll just drop the levels slightly on the second section. Alright, now let's also add a few clothing rips. This is going to simulate the sound of the bear's claws slashing at OB's clothing. So we're going to layer in a couple different cloth ripping sounds here to make sure that the attack sounds pretty aggressive and chaotic. Great. Now, playing what we've got so far, it sounds like this.
But mean bastards, you need to hang.
That's getting there. It's obviously way too loud, and the quality of the sound isn't mixed with the scene very well yet, but we'll come back to all that. Let's keep moving forward with getting our sounds roughed in. So here's OB bursting into the lodge. As he comes through the door, we're going to add another slightly different bear roar to accent the moment and indicate the immediacy of the threat. Alright, now let's play what we've got so far. Okay, so I think that's the right idea, but it's not quite working yet, is it? The sounds don't really feel like they're part of the scene. It doesn't seem like the bear and OB are really outside the cabin, and the quality of the audio is too crisp and present. Let's push the sound back a bit and make the moment feel like it's more part of the environment. A really quick and easy way to do this is with EQ. As sound retreats into the distance, it loses some of its mids and highs. You'll want to experiment with decreasing your middle and upper frequencies to make audio feel more distant and get it just right for whatever scene you're working in. In this case, I felt that the best result came from decreasing the mids and the highs on most of these sounds by a full 20 dB. Listen to the difference. This is before removing the highs and the mids. and this is after removing the highs and the mids. It gives the sound a muffled feeling of distance, like it's coming from outside the cabin. Let's go ahead and add this EQ to the rest of our attack sounds. Now let's see what the whole moment feels like.
Hang.
Big difference, right? Let's finish sound designing this moment. As OB hits the floor and the wind gusts, I want to add another stylized but subtle roar to mix with the wind sound in order to give it a bit more character and fierceness, appropriate to what's going on in the cut. We'll use this quick roar. And we'll decrease the levels by about 14 dB to tone it down a bit. Nice. Now, the final bit of sound I want to add is to simulate the bear pounding on the lodge door trying to get in. Right after OB says, "I almost died out there," let's add another EQ'd muffle bear roar right outside the door.
Goddamn! I almost died out there!
So we'll place the roar here, and then we're going to drop the same EQ that we've been using elsewhere to add a feeling of muffled distance.
Out there!
And let's also add a bed of snarl and growls, also EQ'd, around -18 dB that gradually fades out. Here's just our initial growl, plus the understated snarl bed. Okay, now I think it would be cool to make it sound like the bear slams itself against the door a couple times, trying to get in, while the other two characters try to board it back up. So here's what we've got so far.
You need to hang.
You goddamn son of a bitch! I almost died out there! I ain't ever going out now!
After OB says, "I almost died," and we hear the bear growl outside the door, let's add a big slam against the wood. I'm going to start by using some of the pounding sounds from when OB was trying to get back in himself. I'll take this first one. And I'll also take the first part of this big pound and crash when he breaks back in. Let's layer them on top of each other to create a bang that sounds different from before and even larger. And let's also drop their levels by about 4 dB each. Good. Now we'll have the bear slam into the door a second time, but not quite as hard. So let's duplicate the layered slams, move them down about 2.5 seconds, and we'll decrease their levels to -10 dB and -16 dB respectively, just to tone them down a bit more. Alright, here's what we've got so far.
I almost died out there! I ain't ever going out!
That's working pretty good, but I think that there's one more detail that we can add. Let's layer in a wooden creak and groan, as if the force of the bear's slam against the door is straining the entire lodge a little bit. That should increase the perceived force of the first slam and amplify the danger here. This wooden creak should work. Okay, let's see how it all sounds.
I ain't ever...
Pretty good, but I think I'm going to drop the levels on the wooden creak sound by about 6 dB. It's a little bit much right now. Now let's see how it sounds.
Damn son of a bitch! I almost died out there! I ain't ever going out in that shit! Ever again!
Great, that works well. The only other thing I'm going to do here is lose this wide shot of some of the other men running to shut the door. If we're looking to simulate the presence of a bear outside the cabin, you definitely expect to see it in this shot, so it kind of kills the illusion that we're trying to create.
I almost died. I almost died out there. I ain't ever going out in that shit.
That's better. Okay, so we've done a lot of sound work here, along with our picture tweak. Let's watch everything from start to finish and see how it all feels.
Hand me that little bucket. OB. Go to the outhouse. Take this bucket and dump it down the shithole.
Why do I gotta go outside?
Well, your jacket's already on, and I sorta kinda trust you.
So, Domagoo, I suppose this blizzard counts as a stroke of luck, as far as you're concerned.
You don't hear me complaining, do you?
Nope, I sure don't. Well, how about you, Oswaldo?
How about me what?
Look, considering all the things I've done for money, I ain't one to judge, but don't you feel just the least little bad about hanging a woman?
Well, until they invent a trigger a woman can't pull, if you're a hangman, you're going to hang women.
Well, hell, I guess I ain't never looked at it like that before.
When it comes to some of them mean bastards out there, it's the only thing does the job. You really only need to hang mean bastards. But mean bastards, you need to hang.
I almost died out there. I ain't ever going out in that shit. Ever again.
Alright, cool. That's all working pretty well. So, let's recap what we've done so far. In this lesson, we finished cutting the story sound, and we simulated the bear attack at the cabin. We accomplished this using a number of sound effects, including roars, human yells, cloth rips, and wood pounding and creaks. Coming up in the next lesson, we're going to use a bit of cross-cutting to control the pacing and tension in this scene as we build to the climax. Alright, I'll see you in a bit. At this point, we've convincingly created the presence of a wild bear as an unseen force affecting the drama of the scene. But I think we can do a little bit better. I think we can take this even further and make certain that the pacing and the escalation in the scene really feels good in light of its new additions. So to improve on our scene a bit, we're going to use a bit of picture cross-cutting and perform a few nips and tucks, making everything flow as smoothly as possible. The problem I'm having is that we establish the bear's presence early on, when OB first goes outside. Then we cut back inside and spend a relatively long amount of time with the dinner table conversation. That's all great, but it feels like we're kinda losing track of the bear by the time OB comes charging back into the lodge at the end. Essentially, what we're trying to create here is a parallel narrative, with the bear stalking OB outside, while the other characters have their discussion inside. To accomplish that, we'll just need to do some cross-cutting. Or, more simply put, we just need to rearrange a couple shots, bouncing back and forth between outside and inside. If we can do that, I think we'll be good to go. So in these first 3 outside shots, where we see OB leave the cabin to dump the guns, I think there's an opportunity to split them up. Let's leave the first shot as he walks outside and we hear the bear yell. And we'll also leave the second shot as we see him dump the guns into the outhouse. But let's take this third shot where OB starts walking back to the cabin and we hear the bear's footsteps. And we'll move it all a little bit later, somewhere in the middle of the dinner table conversation. Let's see where it might work.
What about hanging a woman?
Well, until they invent a trigger a woman can't pull, if you're a hangman, you're going to hang women.
Okay, so I spotted a good location for a break. Here, after the hangman has made his point about hanging women,
If you're a hangman, you're going to hang women.
and the sheriff says that he's never looked at it like that before,
Well, hell, I guess I ain't never looked at it like that before.
that's a natural place to cut away from their conversation. I'm going to put this together pretty quickly, since cross-cutting isn't meant to be a detailed focus of this particular course. However, I do want to show you what's possible here by rearranging our cut. So, let's start off by opening up the cut during the dinner table conversation. Now, let's grab our simulated bear POV shot and move it down into its new home. And let's go ahead and close up the hole from where it used to be. That feels a little rough, so I'm going to use a wind gust to transition from the outside outhouse shot back into the lodge, which I'll fade out gradually.
So dumb.
Nice. Now let's close up the space and smooth out the section of the cut where we moved our bear POV shot. Alright, so the cut from inside to the outside, right after the sheriff says, "I guess I hadn't looked at it like that before," feels a little abrupt, and it isn't quite working.
Well, hell, I guess I ain't never looked at it like that. Well, hell, I guess I ain't never looked at it like that.
I'd also like to quicken the pace in this section as we near the climax of the scene. To accomplish both these things, I'm just going to remove his line entirely.
A hangman, you're going to hang women.
Don't you feel just the least little bad about hanging a woman?
Well, until they invent a trigger a woman can't pull, if you're a hangman, you're going to hang women.
Okay, that feels a little bit better. One last thing I'll do to this section here is add a slow camera zoom to the shot. Since it almost looks like we're actually viewing the world from the bear's POV, let's add a slow push in from 100% to 120% to reinforce that notion and add some extra tension. This is a subtle effect, and you may have a hard time noticing it. But if you look at the black mat, you'll be able to more clearly see the zoom that we've added.
Hang women.
Nice. Now we'll add a new mat to the whole cut so that this resize isn't distracting. Better. And last, let's just take a little bit of the film score and bring it in very subtly around the area of our new crosscut. The music does a nice job further building the tension as we lead into the climax where the bear attacks and OB bursts through the door into the lodge. Notice how it comes on and then rises and falls with the picture as we move between environments.
You feel just the least little bad about hanging a woman?
Well, until they invent a trigger a woman can't pull, if you're a hangman, you're going to hang women.
When it comes to some of them mean bastards out there, it's the only thing does the job. You really only need to hang mean bastards. But mean bastards, you need to hang.
I almost died!
Very nice. I think we could get away with playing this dry, without any music, as in the original cut. But it does add a nice feeling of drama to the moment, given what we've added to the scene. Okay, so let's summarize what we've done here. First, we changed the order of the shots. Originally, we started inside, then had 3 outside shots in a row, followed by a long stretch of time in the cabin, until then finally OB burst through the door. Now, we start inside, go outside for 2 bear stalking shots, come back into the cabin for a bit of the discussion, pop back outside for another stalking shot, and then finally cut again back into the cabin, where we sit for a few beats before OB bursts in during the bear attack. This cross-cutting back and forth between inside and outside keeps the bear feeling present in the drama. Second, we keyframed a picture zoom on the outside bear POV shot from 100% to 120% to simulate a slow push in and add some tension to the moment. And third, we added a bit of film score to help highlight the attack and accent the climax of the scene. Alright, so next, after all these adjustments, let's watch everything again and see if we've improved our cut. Coming up in the next lesson, we'll review our newly edited scene and evaluate how everything turned out. Alright, I'll see you in a bit. Alright, here's our newly crafted scene, complete with an invisible narrative, created using only sound, and a few minor picture adjustments. Have a look.
Hand me that little bucket. OB. Go to the outhouse. Take this bucket and dump it down the shithole.
Why do I gotta go outside?
Now your jacket's already on and I sorta kinda trust you.
So, Domagoo, I suppose this blizzard counts as a stroke of luck, as far as you're concerned.
You don't hear me complaining, do you?
Nope, I sure don't. Well, how about you, Oswaldo?
How about me what?
Look, considering all the things I've done for money, I ain't one to judge, but don't you feel just the least little bad about hanging a woman?
Well, until they invent a trigger a woman can't pull, if you're a hangman, you're going to hang women.
When it comes to some of them mean bastards out there, it's the only thing does the job. You really only need to hang mean bastards. But mean bastards, you need to hang.
I almost died out there! I ain't ever going out in that shit! Ever again!
There it is. It's amazing how dramatically you could affect the meaning in a cut using only sound and a bit of creativity. So, in this module, we learned how you can create an invisible narrative using only sound. We took a film scene and planned our sound strategy to bring new meaning to the scene. Then we carefully layered in sound effects and Foley to bring the scene to life. And finally, we employed a bit of cross-cutting, plus some picture tweaks to adjust the content of the scene to fit the new story we were telling. Coming up in the next lesson, we're going to wrap things up and review some of the key lessons that we learned and give you a few parting suggestions as we reach the end of this course. Alright, I'll see you in a bit. Congratulations! You've successfully completed Secrets of Creative Editing. In this course, you learned about the roles and duties of the creative editor. You learned the best way to create the perfect timeline setup in order to speed up your workflow and make your life as an editor easier and more organized. Then, you were guided through the essential skills of dialogue editing and learned how to sculpt the performance in that cut to suit the goals of your scene. And of course, you explored the world of film sound, as we learned how to focus a viewer's attention and tell stories using the power of off-screen or asynchronous sound. And finally, you joined us as we took a great scene from a Hollywood film and crafted an invisible narrative throughout, using layers of sound design, Foley, and just a touch of music. Coming up, we'll look at some next steps you can take to continue your learning with us and on your own. I'll see you in a bit. You may have completed the course, but there's still more you can do. If you haven't already, don't forget to email support@filmeditingpro.com to claim your official course completion certificate. Each certificate comes with a unique verification code that you can enter on our website to confirm the completion of the course, either for yourself or for an employer. Also, choose a topic or two from the course, whether it's sculpting the character focus of a scene or using off-screen sound to tell an invisible story. Whatever interests you the most. Then watch some movies and look for those same techniques being used, and note the different ways they can be handled, depending on the unique story being told. Surprisingly, it's actually quite hard to watch a movie that closely and notice those editorial nuances. Usually, you'll find yourself pulled into the drama and will completely forget what you were looking for in the first place. Feel free to check out our training page to get a look at some of the other creative editing courses that we offer. I should also mention that as a Film Editing Pro student now, you no longer need to wait for an enrollment period to join any of our existing training programs. Just send us an email at support@filmeditingpro.com, tell us that you're a current student looking to join another course. We'll work with you one-on-one to get you set up and learning all about the editing topic of your choice at any time that works for you. Thanks so much for joining us in this course to explore the world of creative editing.